Is Saudi Arabia preparing for a Strait of Hormuz shock as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman loses faith in America's security guarantees? Has Mohammed bin Salman stopped trusting Washington as Saudi Arabia pushes a risky Red Sea oil route instead? After Iran grounded 43 U.S. warplanes, is MBS expanding Saudi pipelines to bypass the Strait of Hormuz? Does Saudi Arabia's Hormuz bypass strategy reveal a complete loss of confidence in America after the Iran war? As Riyadh brings Gulf allies into its new energy plan, could Mohammed bin Salman's bold gamble end up backfiring? Saudi Arabia is actively exploring ways to bypass Iran's strategic grip over the vital Strait of Hormuz as regional tensions continue to intensify. Riyadh is reportedly considering a major expansion of its Red Sea oil pipeline project to reduce dependence on the vulnerable Gulf route. If implemented, Saudi Arabia's ambitious move could provoke strong reactions from both Iran and its Houthi proxy forces in neighboring Yemen. The details of Saudi Arabia's evolving energy strategy were revealed in an exclusive investigative report published by Reuters. At present, Saudi Arabia's crude oil pipeline is capable of transporting nearly 7 million barrels of oil per day through the Red Sea route. The Saudi kingdom is now reportedly planning to increase that capacity by an additional 2 million barrels per day, according to Reuters. Preliminary discussions over the proposed expansion have reportedly already begun with several of Saudi Arabia's key Gulf allies. Kuwait's top petroleum authority has publicly acknowledged that talks with Saudi Arabia are underway regarding the proposed pipeline expansion project. Qatar could also become part of the initiative after its liquefied natural gas exports suffered disruptions following recent Iranian strikes. However, analysts warn that Saudi Arabia's ambitious strategy could require several years and billions of dollars before becoming fully operational. Why Saudi is racing for an escape. Iran's blockade on Strait of Hormuz Gulf producers were forced to shut in nearly 12 million barrels of oil per day. Iraq oil output drops, production reportedly plunged to 1.5 million barrels per day from 4.3 million barrels in May. Iran attacks on energy infrastructure, strikes on sites in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar forced a large-scale reduction in energy production. The Saudi move could also intensify competition with the UAE's existing Fujairah crude oil pipeline and export corridor. Abu Dhabi has already completed an expansion of its own pipeline, significantly doubling export capacity to the Fujairah terminal. This comes after reports that Saudi Arabia barred U.S. military aircraft from operating out of Prince Sultan Air Base for 4 days in May. Donald Trump's Hormuz push triggered a sharp rift with Saudi Arabia, according to a Wall Street Journal report. The Wall Street Journal reported that Saudi Arabia rejected the Trump administration's first major effort to reopen the Strait of Hormuz during the recent regional crisis. According to the report, the Saudi decision has deepened diplomatic differences between Washington and Riyadh at a time of heightened tensions with Iran. The report also said Saudi Arabia suspended U.S. access to key military bases and airspace for operations directed against Iran. That reported decision is said to have complicated American military planning during one of the most tense phases of the confrontation with Tehran. Amid the growing disagreement, the Wall Street Journal reported that President Trump threatened to limit supplies of missile interceptors to Saudi Arabia. The report noted that those interceptor systems form a critical part of the kingdom's air defense network against potential Iranian missile attacks. It further added that Washington is also weighing a reduction of its military footprint inside Saudi Arabia as part of a broader regional review. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio notably did not include Riyadh during his latest tour of the Middle East, drawing attention from regional observers. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman also skipped the recent G7 summit as the crisis involving Iran continued to unfold. Taken together, the developments have fueled fresh questions about the current trajectory of the long-standing strategic partnership between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Analysts say any sustained disagreement between Washington and Riyadh could complicate American efforts to manage security and deterrence across the Gulf region. The reported rift also comes as Iran continues promoting a new Gulf security architecture that would exclude the United States and other outside military powers. Iran has called for a new Gulf security order that excludes the United States and all other outside military powers from the region. Iranian Foreign Minister said Tehran is ready to help establish a new regional security framework led by countries within the Gulf. Araghchi said recent wars had demonstrated it was time for Gulf nations to take responsibility for safeguarding their own security. Araghchi made the remarks after holding talks with Iraq's National Security Advisor, according to Iran International. The foreign minister said the proposed regional framework should also promote broader economic cooperation among neighboring countries. Araghchi argued that lasting regional stability could only be achieved through closer coordination and cooperation among Gulf states. He said military powers from outside the region should have no role in shaping the proposed future Gulf security architecture. Tehran presented the proposal as a lesson drawn from the region's recent security crises and repeated military confrontations. Houthi rebels in Yemen are sharply escalating their threats against U.S. ally Saudi Arabia as regional tensions continue to intensify. On July 4, the Houthis responded after Saudi Arabia threatened retaliation against the Iran-backed armed movement. Houthi spokesman Yahya Saree issued a direct warning to what he called the criminal Saudi regime against targeting Yemen. Yahya Saree threatened to devastate Saudi airports along with the kingdom's critical assets on land and at sea if conflict escalates. "We will break the U.S. Saudi blockade imposed against our people," the Houthi spokesman declared in a defiant warning.
"We warn the criminal Saudi enemy to repeat any attempt to create an atmosphere or aggression targeting our country. He will be met with a comprehensive response by targeting his airports and vital interests in the land and sea. We emphasize the readiness of the armed forces in all their formations and that they are ready to implement the guidelines in order to break the U.S. Saudi blockade against our beloved people and expel the occupiers."
Later, the Houthis released another video warning Saudi Arabia of severe consequences if hostilities continue. The footage showed Houthi fighters undergoing intensive combat drills while preparing for battlefield operations. Houthi personnel were seen carrying advanced rifles and ammunition inside an extensive underground tunnel network. Houthi chief Abdul Malik al-Houthi was also seen delivering a message of defiance and resolve to his fighters. The Houthi chief said, and I quote, "We will not accept the continuation of the aggression, occupation, and American Saudi aggression against our country. We will move in the framework of our rightful position, our just cause and our clear injustice to get rid of all legitimate means, so that our people can live in complete freedom, complete independence, live with dignity and regain their national wealth and complete their legitimate rights." The latest Houthi warning came shortly after Saudi Arabia publicly downplayed the Iran-backed group's threats against the kingdom. The U.S. key Arab ally, on July 4, accused the Houthi rebels of attempting to divert attention from Yemen's deepening humanitarian and political crisis. Riyadh was responding after the Houthis accused Saudi Arabia of violating Yemeni airspace and escalating regional tensions. The spokesman for the Saudi-led coalition backing Yemen's internationally recognized government issued an official statement on July 4. Turki al-Malki accused the Houthis of fueling dangerous escalation and engaging in increasingly hostile behavior across the wider Middle East. Saudi Arabia then vowed to respond with overwhelming force if the Houthis launched any attacks against the kingdom or its territory. Maliki also asserted that the Saudi-led coalition remains fully committed to protecting Yemen from actions carried out by Houthi rebels. Spokesman for Saudi-led coalition in Yemen said, and I quote, "Houthi statements against the kingdom yesterday are merely an attempt to divert attention away from their grave violations against the brotherly people of Yemen, through which they try to export the economic disasters and Yemeni suffering they have caused. Statements are an extension of escalations and hostile behavior demonstrated by the Houthi militia and their attempts to undermine regional and international security. We vow a response with unprecedented determination and force to any and all attempts to target the kingdom, its citizens and residents and national assets, or any attempt to violate the sovereignty of the Brotherly Republic of Yemen." End quote. The remarks came barely a day after Houthi spokesman Yahya Saree issued a direct warning to Saudi Arabia, sharply raising tensions once again. Amid rapidly rising tensions, Mojtaba Khamenei's Houthi allies have warned Saudi Arabia against any new violation of Yemeni airspace, framing future incursions as a red line that will not be ignored. On July 3, the Houthis publicly accused Saudi Arabia of violating Yemen's national airspace, turning a single-flight incident into a fresh diplomatic and military confrontation. The group claims Saudi warplanes tried to block an Iranian civilian aircraft in mid-air, portraying the move as a dangerous act that crossed all acceptable boundaries. According to the Houthis, the aircraft was simply attempting to land at Sanaa International Airport, when Saudi jets allegedly moved in to obstruct its approach. Houthi media insist the aircraft ultimately landed safely in Sanaa before later returning to Tehran, using that outcome to claim both defiance and control over their own airspace. Yemen's internationally recognized government has also strongly criticized Saudi Arabia over what it describes as an aerial blockade. Yemen's foreign ministry warned Saudi Arabia it would end the blockade regardless of the cost, according to official statements. Yemen said it would continue reopening Sanaa International Airport without seeking permission from Saudi Arabia, Press TV reported. The statement came after an Iranian civilian flight landed in Sanaa despite Saudi objections to the operation. Yemeni officials claimed their forces compelled Saudi warplanes to leave the area before the aircraft landed safely. The ministry described the reopening of Sanaa International Airport as Yemen's sovereign and legitimate national right. Yemen also warned Riyadh that any new folly would bring what it described as catastrophic consequences, according to reports. The ministry urged Saudi Arabia to focus instead on protecting its oil sector and advancing its Vision 2030 development plans. It rejected Saudi claims regarding a proposed peace roadmap, calling them completely false and misleading. Yemen accused Riyadh of prolonging the blockade while continuing to obstruct salary payments across the country. The ministry also accused Saudi Arabia of serving U.S. and Israeli interests during the ongoing war in Gaza. Saudi Arabia has led a military campaign in Yemen since 2015, enforcing air, land, and sea restrictions on the country. The conflict has caused widespread destruction and left tens of thousands of civilians dead or wounded over the years. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis killed 14 government troops in an attack south of Hodeidah, reopening one of the war's most dangerous fronts. Pro-government forces later repelled the Houthi assault in Hayes district after hours of intense fighting on the ground. A military official said the clashes at dawn on Saturday lasted several hours before finally coming to an end. Officials said the Houthis also suffered casualties, but no figures were given for rebel losses in the battle. Yemen's civil war has raged since 2015, killing hundreds of thousands and leaving the country shattered by years of conflict. The war has also triggered one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with millions struggling to survive amid poverty and displacement. The Houthis control Sanaa and much of northern Yemen, including the strategic port of Hodeidah. Yemen's internationally recognized government controls large parts of the south, keeping the country split between rival powers. Frontline fighting has largely remained frozen since the UN brokered truce in 2022, even as sporadic attacks continue.